So you made it to the MV Matthew against all the odds, really, in the end, didn't you?
Well, now, I'll tell you one thing. You're very lucky I'm here. And I didn't meet my kingdom come.
Yes.
So I got up this morning and nothing is charged because the electricity obviously went off.
Yeah.
Right? The whole house. Came down the stairs, found the note from the ESB warning in advance the electricity was going to be...
Did it get sent to you last night?
No. A couple of weeks ago, unread, right? Left unread.
Yeah.
So anyway, then I got myself organised to go out to the sentencing of the MV Matthew, and I couldn't open my gates.
So this is going to qualify now as a particularly South County Dublin middle class problem, isn't it? When
There has to be a way.
When one's electronic gates do not open.
Do not open because there's no electricity.
It's very relatable. It's a very relatable problem.
It's quite dangerous, actually.
Yeah.
Because then I thought, and there is somewhere a key to open them when the electricity is off, but no idea. So then I had to ring a taxi, scale the gates, and landed like sort of James Bond style into
actually like James Bond, or was it like
taxi? So anyway, I got there. But when I came out of this, I'm going to go through what happened in the case in a moment. When I came out of it, this gust of a hurricane thing blew up outside.
Yeah.
Did you notice that? You were probably
I didn't. No.
No, I swear to God, had I been on my bike, as was the original plan this morning, I would have been washed out in front of a car or something. Liffey.
Really that bad, yeah?
Yeah, that bad, yeah.
But it was a packed courthouse, was it?
Sure was, yeah.
I mean, it is a great case, really, isn't it? I mean, it's
packed with lots of things.
Yeah.
Not only the media, but also the legal teams, the senior counsels, the long lines of the junior counsels, the solicitors, the Gardaí, the members of the Naval Service, Revenue. I think there was one family member between all 8 of the accused, largely because they're none of them from Ireland.
Yeah.
And it was just gathering for the sentencing. The evidence has been heard before the courts, and we're going to go into that in greater detail next week because there will be a press conference and some actual footage of events released, which I think will be more interesting for people to either view or even for us to be able to explain it as it goes along, because this was a particularly organised shipment of drugs from across the Atlantic. And we can see exactly, we get a window into how this happens. It's a drama.
Yeah.
This is a drama now, I can tell you. But so basically, the judges of the Special Criminal Court sort of explain why they're giving these sentences. They lean on other sentences that have been given in the past, and in particular, most poignantly, I thought the crew of the Lucky Day and the sentences they got, because of course Martin Wandon, for example, got 30 years, dropped on appeal to 27, and he was only walking out of prison last October after serving 17 and a half years, when these guys were, languishing, awaiting trial.
Yeah, I mean, I think the drug sentence or the sentences for these type of offences, when you're talking, multi-ton loads, they have been around 20 years or more. There's obviously a minimum of 10-year sentences for anything over €13,000 or 13,000.
There was a minimum for 6 of them of that 10-year sentence. Now I've loads of notes, so you're going to have to bear with me on this, and I'll maybe explain things in my own terms. But for the 2 guys who were in the Castlemore, the boat that was due to meet the MV Matthew, there wasn't a minimum for the charges they faced. They were slightly different charges. I think theirs was conspiracy.
Yeah, because they never came in.
Court.
Yeah, they never came into possession of the cocaine, but they were obviously out there.
In contact with it, but they were there to do that.
Yes, exactly.
Conspiracy. So there isn't a minimum on that, but on the others. So 6 of them are on the boat, the MV Matthew.
Yeah.
And 2 of them that were sentenced today, they're a 62-year-old and a 31-year-old, were on this Castlemore. And in actual fact, Jamie Harbron, who's the English, he's from Billingham in the UK. He's the only sort of English speaking there.
Yeah.
31-year-old. We've got a little bit of detail about his background. He was describing the fear. He thought he was going to die, and he still has kind of like stress, trauma from that. Because of course,
not from being arrested by the drugs. No, just the weather.
No, but actually, wasn't just the weather. When you think about it, they're on this boat. Him and a Ukrainian national guy called Vitaly Lapa, a 62-year-old. They've bought the Castlemore. They've been in the country for some time, and they have bought along with in the company of person of interest 1, 2, 3, and 4 we hear of today, who've yet to be identified, and they come with them to buy the boat, the Castlemore. It's bought for 300,000. Money is transferred for the purchase of it, and they're basically to float about, to wait, to liaise with the MV Matthew, the bigger boat, which is called the Big Bus in the messages, in the text messages between them. There's a group chat that goes on
WhatsApp, did they say?
It was on Signal, one of them anyway. Signal, which is another encrypted regular. I have Signal, you have Signal, I'm sure. They're just these encrypted, and they set disappearing messages on them. They're describing them as encrypted phones and encrypted technology, but it's similar to what most normal people use. You don't save the messages, or you can disappear them, but the guards were able to get, from what we could hear, most of them.
So, I mean,
not
like
that encrypted-y.
I suppose I don't know how they got them, but if they got them off the devices or got them on warrant, but it's not.
They're messaging. The guys on the boat on the MV Matthew are in touch with sort of what's seen as these sort of overlords
in Dubai.
Okay, and the guys on the Castlemore, this Harbrun and Lapa, are in touch mainly with the MV Matthew, plus with the people of interest they're described as on the land.
And do you get any details of who the people of interest are? Presumably the two.
One was Nuri.
Right.
They went up to Nuri, and this individual, one sort of arrived into the country. And no, very little detail. To be honest with you. And I was trying to catch it, because just in case I was able to put 2 and 2 together and have an idea. Cartel representatives, really, is what they were. Although the Kinahan cartel wasn't mentioned during this sentencing, we all know this is Kinahan. This is Kinahan gear, right? And these people are all hired, brought out to Dubai to be interviewed, and then they get the job on the boat. But the two on the Castlemore, which is bought, and it's to kind of float around and send its coordinates, and it arranges a number of times to meet the MV Matthew. The cocaine is supposed to be 2.2 tons of it is supposed to be taken off the Matthew, and it's 8 o'clock on a September evening. It's in darkness. Certain people have jobs to hold lights. But the Castlemore has numerous problems. It has engine difficulty. There's difficulty with Wi-Fi. They keep going in and out of service, and they never make the arranged points. And you can see the panic then on the MV Matthew, because these big boats can't just knock around as if they're holidaying along your coast. They have to inform countries where they're going.
There's constant radar. There's obviously a sort of the equivalent of air traffic control if it was in the sky. So they can't just have a huge boat like that floating around without drawing attention.
Going up and down the coast. Of course, it did draw attention. Coast Guard. Anyway, it was interesting actually, the whole point of the navigation and stuff, because, and I just try and find my notes, and again we can go into this in better detail next week, but yes. So there was a briefing in August of 2023, and this WhatsApp group was set up. A guy called Dutch Jimmy, who's the really important one of all of those that have been jailed.
Like, he's described as the cartel representative, really. He wasn't. The rest of them are sailors, or they have some involvement in seafaring, but he knows nothing about seafaring. He's solely there to...
And his name is Kamali Ogston. He's 50. And he's from the Netherlands, but he's Dutch with Turkish origin. Has an ex-wife, 2 kids over there, described how one of the kids was sick, and there was kind of an appeal that he was only doing this because he came from an underprivileged background, and he had a sick child who he was trying to support. So that was taken in to account by the judges, but nonetheless, he got the heftiest sentence. But anyway, this WhatsApp group is set up following the briefing in August of 23, and Dutch Jimmy is on it. He's not an officer. Most of the men today have a long career in marine work. They have studied it. Some of them have studied navigation. They've worked on ships all their lives. He has no links to it whatsoever. And he's also put to bed in the officers' quarters on the ship, which I imagine are very luxurious compared to the rest of people in ships sleeping in bunk beds and all the rest of it. So it was acknowledged that he was there to perform a kind of a supervisory role. There was, I think they said 22 people on board the MV Matthew, and 15 of them were not aware of the purpose that the boat was being used. They actually come down along the coast of Venezuela around September, and they seem to get the crew, initially it's described as deliberately distracted, but ultimately they get them pissed. Give them a load of free alcohol, these 15 that aren't aware of what the boat's, and they load the drugs onto the MV Matthew. And at this point, this was interesting, they set up a system, which is you download some sort of an app or something, and you can put a false route onto your automatic boating system and broadcast it. So it's called spoofing.
Yeah, right, okay. Formally, that's the same.
Formally spoofing. So
okay.
You and I always describe ourselves as professional spoofers, having gone to the College of Spoofology. But in actual fact, there is a thing called spoofing. Right,
that might be actually the origin of the term.
Could be.
Yeah.
So now the use of spoofing, they said, was known to all the officers on this ship. But you're basically sending navigational signals to say they had said that they were steering past Trinidad and Tobago and were going down off the coast of Guyana, which is another traditional landing point for the cartels. But in actual fact, they seem to have remained all the while in Venezuela, given out free drink to the crew, got them absolutely pissed up so as they could load the cocaine on board.
Yeah.
Now, there's 5 bays. This is a big cargo ship. I have some of the details of it here. It's 190 metres long, 32 metres wide. 5 cargo holds are on it. And yes, the crew is 21. So while this is a big ship and 5 cargo holds, only one of them was filled
with the cocaine. So there's no other. Sometimes there might be deception. There might be other cargoes as well. But
they wondered why, they'd be crossing the Atlantic with such a load, because they sort of described them at one stage as when the cocaine was actually taken out of the pallets that it was held in. It was like carrying in the boot of your car 4 matchboxes.
Right, okay, yeah.
So this
because normally they would on ships, even if they're only dealing, they'd fill them up no matter what.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like flying on a plane with just 2 passengers. They would try and fill it up for economic purposes.
So now we get on to the intelligence is garnered by both Gardaí and Revenue independently of each other, they say. So there must be some intelligence coming from here, but they're also liaising with MAUAC, which is the Portuguese-based marine, coordinate of all number of law enforcement agencies in it, including ourselves. And it's the kind of the Europol of the sea.
Yeah, it's the Interpol of shipping, really.
So they have other interests in this investigation, and the Netherlands. They named an awful lot of countries, actually.
Yeah.
Again, I have my notes here somewhere, but I'd need to go through them in more detail. But anyway, so this intel is there. So this boat is being monitored, okay?
So it's being monitored from when it's left Venezuela?
Well, appears to be. Certainly in Ireland, between the 11th and 19th of September, the Gardaí are on this, because an individual arrives, he's travelled from Dubai, and he's referred to as person of interest 1.
Yeah.
And evidence is being gathered by the surveillance unit from a combination of mobile phone and CCTV, etc. Lapa, he's one of the 2 guys. It's a 62-year-old who's on the Castlemore. He arrives in Ireland in July of 2023, and he's staying at hotels in the Republic of Ireland in the north. So on the 20th of September, this is before this plot comes undone, his mobile phone is connected to Wi-Fi in Newry and associated, we were told, with the home address of a second person of interest, POI2, person of interest 2.
Okay.
Okay. So the day after that, so obviously Lapa's up in that house in Newry.
Yeah.
On his clock there. Anyway.
Presumably getting instructions from somebody more senior.
Yeah. Or certainly the time has come. He's been in the country since July.
Okay.
You know, his work now has to get going. So on the 21st September, the next day, there's a number of people who travel down to buy this boat. They meet in Glengariff and then they purchase. I think they did purchase the boat in Glengariff, did they?
I think so, yeah. I think they did.
So there's a number of people mentioned at this stage. Person of interest 1, 2, and 4.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's obviously a 3 there somewhere, maybe not involved in this, but person of interest 1, who's not the guy from Newry, but who is in Glengariff with person of interest 2 and our guy Lapa. He's responsible for the arrangement and the purchase of the fishing vessel, the Castlemore. So he has to be a significant Irish-based cartel operative.
Yes, you would think so.
Going to have the hands on the money or access to the money.
Yeah, and the guy's flown over from Dubai, presumably with the clear instructions and the plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is person of interest 1.
Yeah.
Is flown in from Dubai.
Yeah.
Person of interest 2 is in Newry. Both of them and a person of interest 4 are buying this boat, but it's person of interest 1 who has come in from Dubai, who has the money for the vessel, however that came up.
Yeah.
We don't know yet. So anyway, they buy this thing and this WhatsApp group, I think it is at this stage, called the Crew Signal Group is set up. And it's set up at the same time as the boat is purchased. On a Starlink satellite system is installed.
Yeah.
On this boat, right?
Yeah.
Now, some of them are going by nicknames at this stage. Lapa, who's the 62-year-old caught on the Castlemore, he's going by Happy. Harbron, who is the younger English guy who's going to get into trouble on this boat, is called Boy Scout. And person of interest 1, our boy unidentified who comes in from Dubai and who is involved in all this on the ground, is called Rain Man, as a nickname on it. So there's senior roles were described in court of the OCG are giving instructions to their senior roles they're in, and it's giving instructions. They're getting instructions from an OCG in Dubai, and from the names Padre, K, are used. Again, they're not linked to any of the crew that were actually jailed, so they're clearly coming in from Dubai.
Padre K.
Padre and K.
Right, okay.
You were thinking of Father Kinahan.
I don't know.
You were.
Well, I was.
No,
I was just wondering.
You had a moment there now.
No, I was just
thought that you had.
No. I thought nobody else could have possibly thought of this.
No one else could possibly thought of it. But because I was reading it, you didn't realise it was a comma.
I didn't.
So
well, I do now. But it could. But go ahead.
Anyway, at this stage, they're starting to talk about the coordinates of the two boats, and the MV Matthew has been described as the big bus. The big bus is on its way, kind of thing. So this joint task force is established as these operations are underway at sea, and the LEWB Yates is brought in from the Navy in a monitoring and supervisory position.
Right.
And it's actually the Yates that will end up giving chase to this boat.
So you think at this stage the authorities are aware of both boats and all the people involved?
For sure.
So they know it's because if you remember when it happened, there was, the initial reports are that this
bad
get in trouble and people found out this, or then they might have known on one of the boats and then they managed to track it all down. From your reading of it there, everything was known.
They certainly have it.
Yeah.
They certainly have it in the time beforehand.
Yeah.
Do they have it back to July?
Yeah.
Or have they looked back to see what stage Lapa comes into the country, presumably on his own passport, and that's a fairly easy thing to say? Or are they watching them from then? If we look at the lucky day, and that was unlucky because it was caught many years ago because of bad weather and the rib boat sank. But they're in the country quite a while beforehand as well. They rent property in Cork overlooking the shoreline there at Dunlock Bay, or that coast at least, and they are, moonlighting as if they're rich tourists from the UK. They're bringing those jeeps in that'll be used to transfer the drugs, and they're bringing the ribs over, and they're trying to look as if they're normal. So these guys are obviously in the country sometime. How long the Gardaí are on them, I don't know, but they definitely are They've the surveillance team going. They're obviously up on those phones, or certainly they're aware of those phones and what communication's being used. And they know that the MV Matthew isn't on that spoof course. It's actually on course to Ireland. The MV Matthew seems to originally have been planned to be landed in Gdansk in Poland.
Yeah.
And it changes, or else they're using that to confuse the crew. I don't know, maybe to...
But that's the route they book,
that's
effectively.
The route they're supposed to go to, to Gdansk. But they end up then coming towards Cork and ultimately to Belfast, which seems to be their destination that they were claiming was to be their landing point. Anyway, the LEWB Yates is out at sea and it's keeping an eye. And the first of the 3 planned rendezvous happen for 8 p.m. on the 23rd of September. And they are in communication with the Castlemore at this stage, because the captain is sort of advising that the crew will need to assist the Castlemore with the light and the dropping ropes. He wants them to be aware that there's 4 jumbo bags and there's a need to balance this cargo, and eventually gives them the specific weight of 2.2 tons.
So presumably, so that's, must be a tricky procedure, is it? That you're transferring 2.2 tons, although as you described, it's not massive physically. I mean, it's still a hard job, isn't it, to move something like that mid-sea? Yeah.
Now, the deck officers, back to this WhatsApp group that's going, this gives us a little, and it's a signal group as well.
Yeah.
We're given a little hint of what's happening and who's where, because they're receiving and responding to persons in Dubai, Germany, the Netherlands, Iran, Turkey, Great Britain, UK, and Spain.
So they're all in this signal group?
In this signal group, along with the deck officers, who are the officers, basically, those people that we saw in court today that were in charge of getting this cargo landed.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of people involved. And we are often told that there's a number of investors that come together when the bigger the shipment is, that, it's sort of like they'll bring together a number of cartels. Is the Matthew all Kinahan money in it, or have they brought in partners from Iran, which is largely suspected, and from Turkey?
Yeah, because there's always been described, and you see it in these Europol reports, about a division of labour, basically. So, for example, it was said of the gangs like the Dino and Tito cartel that they would really be in charge of logistics, and that somebody like the Kinahans maybe be in charge of making the cocaine purchase and getting it to the boat, but then one of the other cartels would be in charge of crewing a boat, getting it over, and that they all work together in that way. Not some of them wouldn't, other people would invest money, so it's more complex. And of course, it was said about the Iranians that the Iranian state also played a role, and the Russian state as well, in arranging some sort of logistics, some sort of transportation, where they might have greater expertise and greater contacts. So yeah, it's
so there's a network of bosses really that are feeding into this signal group, and perhaps, as you say, some of them could be, waiting to logistically move this.
Yeah.
If they did land the coke into Ireland, they'd have needed to get a network, divvy it, break it.
Yeah, you might have somebody in charge of transport. You might have somebody in charge of trucking. Yeah. I mean, of course, it could be that everybody does one thing, but I think, look, all of those Europol reports have said they're tending towards specialisation. For example, you might have a grouping that would be solely in charge of paying for something, moving money around, and they all work together and sort of take on a specialist role, I suppose.
Now, again, there's talk about somebody with navigational knowledge and expertise on this. There's one particular leader and advisor to the deck officers who's known as the number one, and they say his identity is unknown.
Yeah.
So some sort of a shipping expert that's keeping an eye on this thing. The weather conditions were unfavourable, to say the least. Now, the captain, and I just want to get his name, is it Jelve, right?
Yeah.
He's an Iranian, a guy called Sohail Jelve. So he's a 52-year-old. Now, he sounds like he's probably a good captain, to be honest with you, to me. And he sounds as if, okay, it's clear that he's not innocent as to what's happening here, but he's worried for the safety of people. He doesn't like he's dissatisfied with the choice of Irish Waters to make this transfer.
So
He's annoyed when the Castlemore doesn't show up on time, and he's adamant that, you know, a smaller boat should follow, that they're not doing this right, essentially. But of course the Castlemore is having problems with the swell, with the slow speed of the boat, because the engine is failing, and the Wi-Fi malfunction.
So he sounds like he is an Iranian originally. He seems to have moved to Dubai a number of years ago, and he'd left family in Dubai, and that seems to have been on the back of his mind that if this doesn't work out, his family would have been under pressure.
Yeah.
But these guys, unlike Dutch Jimmy, like these are corrupted, really seamen, aren't they? Like they're people that have spent their lives in the maritime industry, but have ended up through whatever set of circumstances to become involved in the drug trade.
Well, interesting. Some of them seem to have been targeted through, like, not their LinkedIn profiles, but they were headhunted,
right?
And they all went out to Dubai for this interview for the job.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, it's unclear how many of them know what's happened from the Dubai end of things, but they certainly know what they're doing by the time they get on the boat and the drugs are accepted. The ones that are in court do. And they've all pleaded guilty to that.
Yeah, so presumably they don't get told exactly how much this is 157 million euros worth, but they know something. They know they're involved in illegal.
They're offered an actual wage. And so the wages will shock some of us, I think, but at the same time, you have to remember they're from places in the world maybe where the money will go further. But anyway, this Jalve guy, the captain, and he spent most of today with his head in his hands. And he showed the most emotion of any of them. Like, you know, this is somebody who feels he's lost everything through this. So anyway, you know, he's getting a bit cranky. Obviously doesn't like the plan. Doesn't think Irish Waters are good. And the crew of the Castlemore aren't showing up, but they're having all these difficulties, which he doesn't know about. So second rendezvous is arranged. It doesn't take place. Messages again show Jalvi being a bit cantankerous. He's not prepared to stop, and he insists that you cannot unload this cargo due to the swell that has come up. So the MV Matthew, the big bus, is making its way up the Irish Sea and is beginning to come to the attention of the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard sort of starts to communicate with the boat. Is everything okay? Whatever it's... but the night of the 23rd... By the night of the 23rd, this would be the second day, second night, Jalvi is showing that he's very angry, and the messages that are on the phones, these WhatsApp groups, shows that he's expressing frustration. At one point he says he'd rather go to prison, but he will not stay in the storm. So a rendezvous is eventually agreed again for the 24th, and the Castlemore is advised of this revised plan, but they've no Wi-Fi. And they're told at this point that the big bus is waiting below Dublin. So it's necessary for them each to track one another's location. So after 7 a.m. in the morning of the 24th, Jalvi initially plans to bring the cargo onto deck. So he's taking it out of the hold and he's bringing it onto deck. He's concerned about the wind and, again, unloading it. So he shares a photo of the drugs on the deck to this WhatsApp group. And he's told, don't worry, there's backup. There's a fast boat being sent in from Dublin.
Now, is that true?
Well, that's what he's told. And he certainly doesn't, disbelieve it. And I don't think the court disbelieves that there was a third boat. And there likely was, given the amount of money involved in this. So on the afternoon of the 24th, the crew of the Castlemore is going at less than 1 knot. For any of those people who know shipping, that's pretty small. So the engine has failed twice already, and things are not looking good for them. The MV Matthew is kind of coasting up and down, hoping to get together so as they can exchange it. Yep. But while the Matthew sitting 20 nautical miles off Waterford, a distress call comes in from the Castlemore. It's hit sandbanks because the boat has basically started to just float.
Yeah.
There's no steering of it.
Yeah.
It's hit the sandbanks and the two lads are, clinging on. big time in trouble. So they ring the Coast Guard, who comes out and saves them and plucks them basically from the waters. And this causes clearly absolute panic on the MV Matthew. So on the evening of the 25th, the Matthew has been sort of again going up and down the coast. They're obviously trying to get plan B in place. They don't know what's happened on the Castlemore because they've lost communication. The captain, Jalve, obviously panics and he ends up being airlifted from the vessel.
By who though? He's by helicopter.
Because he's claimed to be sick.
Okay.
But he takes with him 3 phones and 2 suitcases, one which will later be opened, and within it is $53,000. Analysis of the phones will then lead to a lot of interesting evidence that's come before the courts. He said 2 of the phones were his and 1 of them wasn't. Now that's the one that was being used on the WhatsApp group to take and give instructions and all the rest of it. So at this point, this is obviously very tricky. So the MV Matthew is ordered to drop its anchor and remain in position. And the it said it needs engine repairs. They're obviously trying to buy time on the Matthew while they're getting instructions from Dubai. They're saying, oh, we're grand. We just need to, we've a bit of engine difficulty. We're going to stop here for a while and then we'll move again. They are directed to come into harbour by, must be the
Coast Guard.
Coast Guard, yes. So they're in, and the MV Matthew says that, no, we're grand. There's just 1 or 2 days repairs. We'll be fine. We'll look after it, kind of thing. Sometimes they say they're coming into port. They're going to make a direct route in. Sometimes they then say, we're actually okay now. So it sounds like they are buying time. Sometimes confirming they're going to return to Cork port and get checked out, and sometimes not. So eventually the WB Yates, this is the Navy boat, is kind of moving up and down parallel to the Matthew. And they've noted that the Matthew has moved back and forth up and down the coastline 37 times.
Okay.
Hugely suspicious activity, even if you didn't have the intel to know what's on board.
So, but at this point, the guys on the MV Matthew, they're obviously worried. They're obviously getting stressed out, but they don't know that they're nabbed yet, do they?
No, they don't. They still think that they could be okay because these people of interest on shore who are sending messages to them tell them, we've consulted lawyers and customs have no authority to board the vessel.
Yeah.
What you do need to do, though, is you need to increase your distance from the land and change your destination. So on board, they're, liaising with customs, and their customs are telling them to turn starboard. Irish customs are telling them to turn starboard. And they're saying that they are going to move on, basically. There's no they're not actually saying you're not entitled to board us yet. Things are heating up. And eventually, customs direct them to immediately take route to Cork. And they're advised that obstructing this customs demand will result in penalties. So the criminal organisation has been kept up to date all the while on these, and they're telling them, no, you say this to them, you say this to them. This goes on sometime.
And who's now the captain is gone, who's taken control of the...
So one of the other members has taken control. The second officer has taken control of the boat at this stage, a Filipino.
Yeah, a guy called Harold Estoesta, is it?
Yeah, exactly. So he's taking control. He's dealing with customs and he's liaising again with the kind of the bosses, I suppose.
Yeah.
But all the while he continues to travel south towards international waters on instruction from the criminal organisation.
And so we've heard this before. Basically, there's a thing called international waters, like Ireland's waters, Ireland's territory, for example. It stretches off our coast. I don't know the exact number, but say a couple of 100 metres off our coast. That's all Ireland's territory, and subject to our laws. And then there's a certain amount of waters that are called international waters, where no country particularly owns them. And the people on directing the operation from Dubai seem to believe that's totally and utterly lawless territory. And once you get into international waters, you're fine. Nobody can police that. There's no laws there. But that isn't the case, really, is it? There's various...
No, and they're kind of armchair bosses as well.
Yeah.
You can just start to imagine the drama of this. It's September, you're out on the seas, you've been behaving in such a way that you now have the William Butler Yeats is kind of, shipping up and down parallel to you. You have customs demanding you come into Cork. You're aware on the boat that this is a high drama situation, and yet Dubai are directing you keep going, foot to the floor.
To Suriname, is it that they're asking them to
Well, initially they tell them to go to Gibraltar, and then they tell them to go to Sierra Leone.
Sierra Leone,
so these kind of decisions are changing as well in the background. So they're kind of heading onwards towards international waters. The conversations are going on. Get into Cork. Yeah, we will. But they're not showing that they are. Yeah. So at the same time, the bosses in Dubai are encouraging the crew not to panic. Calm down, you know? So at 12:11, the William Butler Yeats declares itself as a warship. Now this seems to be part of nautical policy. It's, Commander Flynn then declares the boat as a warship and fires a single warning shot, which has no effect. The MV Matthew keeps going foot to the floor, right?
Yeah. So
then there's a burst of shots, and what's described as a final warning shot across the deck is mounted by a machine gun. On board, the cartel are being informed that they're threatening us. They're firing at us now. They're telling us to comply. They are being told to go back and say to the WB Yeats. They go back to the WB Yeats and they say to them, "We're a commercial ship. We are people with families. We're afraid.
Yeah,
my people are beginning to cry." He says at one point back to Commander Flynn, who says that there won't be any problems if you do kind of what you're told, And eventually the MV Matthew asks Commander Flynn if he's in hot pursuit, and the Navy say they're in hot pursuit.
Yeah.
It's confirmed. So then the cartel are told the Irish Navy are in hot pursuit, and they're just told to basically burn the drugs and throw away the phones.
So they seem to have some...
And throw the phones away first.
Oh, really?
Burn the drugs second, because of course the phones would have implications for those in Dubai and outside and who are giving the orders. So as the William Butler Yeats goes into hot pursuit, we have the Rangers coming in on the chopper above, and the MV Matthew still full throttle trying to escape to the high seas. So they are at this point being directed to go to Sierra Leone. They're being given words of encouragement, which is nice, by their bosses in Dubai, and they're being told to defy the Irish authorities and to tell the Irish authorities, "You're endangering us. You're endangering our vessel." To tell the Irish authorities, "We're afraid of you.
Yeah.
I have crew on board, and they're panicking. They're crying."
Yeah,
it's bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah.
But these were the instructions that were coming. And to inform the Irish that we're headed for Sierra Leone, where we can be safe.
Yeah.
With the MV Matthew, where my people can be safe, and we're going to find a safe port of refuge. In other words, you Irish are like the cowboys, the bandits, the pirates of the seas. Eventually, the choppers come along, and the Ranger wing fast rope it aboard, and they even describe, and the court made a particular mention, the judges made a particular mention, the bravery of the Irish Rangers, because the boat was still moving. They had to come down on these fast ropes, but there was still a kind of a massive jump onto the deck, because they had to go to a particular part of the boat, presumably so as the helicopter could hover above.
Yeah.
And then that meant that the Rangers had to do another jump, which was super dangerous. But once they got on board, they pretty much secured the boat, the MV Matthew, fairly quickly. They put out the fire that had at that point been started on the lifeboat.
And how did they had a plan for the fire as well, didn't they? They were using some sort of accelerant or something.
Paint thinners, they had loads of stuff, and they had ordered all of those on. They found a lot of those accelerants beside the fire. They lost a little bit of the drugs, but not much in the fire. But the Ranger wing take control of the boat, and they set it to automatic to go back to Cork.
Yeah.
So they discover then these 5 cargo holds, and only one of them in the middle is used. Number 3, that's the frames of the pallets are left, but the drugs are jammed into these lifeboats, ready to be set afire. Like, it was dramatic.
Yeah, it does. It is really dramatic. And they obviously didn't get rid of the phones at this, like, despite the instructions.
No, they didn't. They obviously have some of the phones still.
Mm.
Now, the court basically the judges in her sentencing went through kind of how each of these individuals, and there's 8 of them, so we're not going to go through each of them. There were 6 on the boat, and the 2 other lads that were on the Castlemore, that they, a lot of them have given numerous interviews. They didn't admit to many things at the beginning of it. They've admitted to some things at the end of the interviews. Phones have been seized, evidence has been put to them, etc. The captain was arrested in hospital, and he actually was put under 13 interviews, and he sort of along the way accepts that he was the captain of the boat, says he got involved through friendship with somebody else. He said that the money he was going to earn was going to finance him to establish a soccer academy in Dubai and help him get residency. He was promised that as part of this job, that he'd be helped get residency. And he was the one who said Osgden, who is our guy, Dutch Jimmy, was put on, he worked directly for the organised crime group, was put on board to kill him, he said. Now, so they went through all of them and basically what they did. And obviously it was serious that, they did what they did. They kept kind of running away when, they never really gave up, did they?
No,
they were apprehended.
They were totally caught.
So all of that goes into part of the case. And the court was told there was a large body of documents in support of many of the submissions. So in sentencing them, the court recognised that this was really a higher end of the offence.
Yeah.
Presumably because of the amount of drugs and the efforts in which they went to
avoid capture, I suppose.
Avoid capture and to land them. So Jalvi, the 52-year-old Iranian national, married to 2 adult kids, 22 and 20. They're both students, in one of which is in Istanbul. The wife has a cancer diagnosis. He's the primary earner. He's an educated guy with a bachelor's degree in navigation and transport, and he lectured in Iran for a number of times before he moved into kind of football coaching, where he excelled. The court had letters from his wife and his daughter, and the positive qualities and impact he has on many people's lives. Photos were sent of him and his family. The court heard he suffers from depression and migraine, and has an injury in his neck, finds prison life here lonely and difficult. He's had 1 visit from his family member since he's been in custody, and is unable and unlikely to see anyone due to immigration and financial impediments. He's been very productive in prison, has done a large number of courses, and he wrote a lengthy letter of apology to the people of Ireland for his behaviour. This is the captain, as I say. Dutch Jimmy, 50, divorced. He had 4 letters in support of his son, daughter, ex-wife and a lifelong friend. And it goes into details about sickness that his son has. He has had 2 brain tumours removed, seems to need quite a lot of care, has epilepsy. And the mother is the primary carer, highly dependent on Osgan for the money. His daughter also speaks about her brother's medical condition, and the family friend talks about how he was brought up in a socially deprived immigrant community in the Netherlands, where he learned survival law on the streets, and that he was an entrepreneur, he described him as, with a background in shipping, but a very strong work ethic. And he said that he had debts which he'd mounted due to his son's illness, and he made risky choices for a better future for his family, which he now knows is a big mistake, but he has a big heart.
Yeah.
There's Jimmy.
Yeah, okay.
So then there is an individual by the name of Gavrik. Am I pronouncing that right? I'm sure I'm not.
Well, you're not going to... Well, Gavrik, I think, is actually good. So he's another Ukrainian, Mikhailo Gavrik.
Yeah, 32-year-old, single, parents separated, raised by his mother. Excelled in sports and played chess competitively. Won medals and prizes for that. He has references from a number of people. People talk about him being a motivated student, studied navigation at a prestigious college in Odessa, excelled at that, worked for MSC, big shipping company, as a deck cadet. And he got a character reference actually from the director of MSC, who said he was a very hardworking, conscientious guy with a high level of professional training. And we heard that he was active in prison with the education unit and had done a large variety of courses, and showed remorse, or is remorseful. Now, the Filipino Estos Esta, 31-year-old. This is the guy who takes over the ship after the captain is airlifted for hospital treatment, and he kind of makes really radical decisions. You can really see he's taking instruction from the cartel in the face of what's happening to him in Irish waters.
Yeah.
So he is a very well placed individual from a very successful family in the Philippines with, what did the judge describe them as? Oh, yes, that he was from a highly respectable, service-orientated family. I mean, he has relatives who are very high up in the Coast Guard, a colonel in the army, and they're working in the Air Force. A number of them wrote, actually, there were so many notes for him, in his support that he just made this bad decision. He had got himself involved in restorative justice in the Irish prisons, has already won a Gashka Award, and has, settled down in prison, although it's difficult for him. Glazai, the 33-year-old Ukrainian, married with one child. Again, he was reared by a single mother who was a kindergarten teacher. He was a diligent and capable student. His wife says he's a good provider, and he's the love and support of his own family. He was never associated with criminals or engaged in illegal activity before. A hardworking, law-abiding guy, and he's ashamed of his actions. And then there's Hassani. He's the 40-year-old Iranian, no previous convictions, unmarried, with two sisters, and he seems to look after them all, or so these letters say. Attended Marine College in 2011, and he apparently made bad decisions because of the financial demanding needs of his family. So Habron, Habron and Lapa are the two that are on the Castlemore. Yeah. Habron, the 32-year-old, he's the only one with previous convictions, 9, some of which are for drug offences, but non-custodial. Good at sport and college, good in sport, etc., not too academic. He is a father of 3, 2 of them are stepkids. We heard he's suffering anxiety, depression, and has a history of drug abuse himself. So, his dyslexia, was bullied in school. A psychological report found he's angry, anxious, sad, and impulsive, and he's been addicted to coke since the age of 15. He's no qualifications. His partner's on social welfare, and he thought he was going to die that night in the Castlemore when it hit the sandbank. He still has blackouts from that and gets ill from it. He finds prison challenging, continues to abuse drugs, and suffers from low mood, anxiety, and insomnia. Lapa, finally, the last of the 8, married with a 18-year-old son. He's the Ukrainian, a 62-year-old. A letter from his wife, Irina, said that his hometown is under occupation, that he was forced to leave for financial necessity. His son is attending Maritime University, and he was at risk of losing home. So that's why he took up the role.
So Habron gets the lowest sentence of 13 and a half years. And Ozgen, Dutch Jimmy, he gets the highest sentence. Does he have 20 years? And the rest are in between that, effectively.
Yeah. And that's a drop from the headline sentence. So the headline sentence actually, and there was a bit of a gasp of breath in the courtroom for this, for Ogston Dutch Jimmy, because the headline, she said, was 30 years.
Yeah.
And she mitigated that because pleaded guilty, no previous convictions, his admissions, his family circumstances, the impact of his absence on his family, and the character references he got.
So I think if you were look at the lucky day, there was a number of, nearly all of them pleaded not guilty.
Well, this was it, yeah.
And I think you can see that discount really from 30 to 20 years. There might be some discount because of his lack of previous convictions.
The lucky day actually case was part of the judge's
sentencing metric, they call it.
Yes. Yeah. So 1.5 tons that was at that point. And as you say, they pleaded not guilty. It went to trial. So they don't get the mitigation of the guilty plea.
So I'd say, and we can only
Two of them got 30 years in that, I think.
Two of them got 30 years.
Now, some of them were reduced on appeal, including Martin Wandens. But
now, and if you look back on the lucky day, a lot of these guys, all of these guys really are done by their digital communications, aren't they? There's some of them there that may in other circumstances being able to say, well, I didn't know what was in it or anything like that.
They're on the WhatsApp groups, yeah.
But if you're on the WhatsApp group, you're in trouble, aren't you?
Yeah.
And of course, there was no WhatsApp back in the lucky days, so that's the route they took. Some of those. Well, I was on the boat, but I didn't know what we were carrying, and it didn't work then, and it's definitely not going to work now when you're on a WhatsApp group with a picture of the drugs being sent on. So, but they do get the discount nonetheless for that guilty plea because they don't put the state through the expense of fighting a case.
Jesus, when you see the expense of even the amount of lawyers in that courtroom, and it can be guaranteed they're all being paid for by the taxpayer.
Yeah.
Then you have the amount of them, 8 of them, that are all going into custody at the expense of the Irish taxpayer. It's like it's a lot of money. I do want to say this because this was important, and I think it's come out throughout it, was that the court recognised the bravery of those Rangers and what they did.
Yeah.
And all of the people involved on the William Butler Yeats, the decisions that were being made from customs, from this multi-agency task force that got together really to try and apprehend these drugs hitting the market and these people profiting from that. And the court said that they wanted to observe the professionalism and the competence of all of those who worked together to foil the Matthew from escaping.
Yeah.
How embarrassing would that have been for the Irish had the Matthew done a runner? Really would have been.
Oh, totally. But you do see the level of professionalism with the Gardaí and the other agencies of the state involved, how much better we are, not in terms of the international communication, the ability to make the proper decisions at the right time under pressure. And I think, and we'll never know the exact details of it, but the level of intelligence is clearly...
For sure.
Now, and if you look, of course, the Kinahans aren't mentioned, but, everybody believes they're there in the background or the foreground, whatever way you want to look at it.
We knew from the beginning with the MV Matthew that this was Cartel.
Yes,
from our own sources. But also, it's not rocket science. There's not very many people that can afford this kind of an operation.
No, and it's where the ship was registered.
Ship was bought. It was registered to a company.
In Dubai.
You had the company. Was the company not in the Marshall Islands registered?
Well, it was, but there was some part of it was registered in
There was another company that
the
hired the staff that was in Dubai.
Yes,
and they did go for interviews.
Yes, in the freehold, where the Kinahans have registered other businesses.
Yeah.
So, but look, beyond all that, I mean, we've seen the Kinahan cartel dismantled through murder trials and convictions and investigations of that type. But you see, again, this is another part of the dismantling, which is attacking, I suppose, their ability to make loads of money. And ultimately, that's what keeps these criminal networks going. It's interesting when you see Dutch names there. The Dutch state probably, it's fair to say, failed to get on top of their organised crime problem far more than we did. And that had huge social impacts on that country, including the murder of legal professionals. And it went on and on. The Netherlands was accused of being, by its own politicians, of becoming something of a narco state. So the dismantling of organisations like the Kinahan cartel is hugely important, not just for getting drugs off the street, but also for basically stopping that level of chaos and disorder in a society. And you have to say, and we can sometimes be critical of bodies of the state, and we always will be if we see fit. But there's a huge success, I suppose, at the root of all of this, in all ways, that the Kinahan cartel have been dismantled from top to bottom.
Yeah.
And the ability of the state to investigate organised crime at all levels, to solve murders that occur, but also to have sort of preemptive actions is hugely impressive.
And Justice Melanie Greeley, who was the lead of the 3 judges in the Special Criminal Court, really sort of said that the fact that importation of the drugs was stopped was, you see, she said that drugs has caused widespread harm and dysfunction on society. And its liberal availability is only beginning now to be noticed, kind of, I suppose, in the trickle effects.
Yes.
So that's, she was saying the fact that this organised crime group, as you say, was going to to benefit from that's what's important here.
Yeah.
And outside the court, the Detective Superintendent Joe O'Reilly from the Garda Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau said that, the Matthew and other drug operations clearly demonstrate that all the agencies of the state, along with their international partners, will go on to work together to dismantle these groupings.
Yeah, and without having to get into other cases, because they're all at different stages in the legal system, we have seen that Ireland coastline has been used probably for many years as for a drop-off point for cocaine shipments. But you can see anybody who can just open their eyes and look at what's happening, you can see that the state is making huge progress in stopping them.
And I suppose it's worth mentioning that the other unusual aspect of this, we might go into this a little bit more next week, maybe if we can bring Robin in, was Detective Superintendent Keith Halley, who led the Garda operation that captured the MV Matthew, that he gave evidence to the court that was in PowerPoint presentation. This is what you're dealing with. The mapping of it all.
Yeah.
It's almost the skill set to bring together where this thing was bought, who gets on where, the shipping routes, they're claiming to take the shipping routes they actually take. It's quite a technical thing as well as everything else. I mean, you need your skill set in that base policing, what you want to do, making decisions under huge pressure and where really lives are at risk and other people are panicking. You're out at sea, and you need to bring both the drugs and the suspects in, or without either or, you don't have a case.
Yeah, of course, and you have to bring them in a way that you can then make a case. I mean, and so look, it's literally drama at high seas, and they managed to get it all done. So it is impressive, and get it all done quickly. It's not what is it, a year and a half goes it? So I mean, it's all it's a very efficient operation ultimately. So yeah, it's the good guys did win in this case.
And hopefully we'll be talking about this again because we'll be able to see some footage.
Yes.
Some actual footage.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Niall.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.